From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Wednesday, August 20, 2025. Benjamin Netanyahu says Anthony Albanese is a weak leader who has betrayed Israel and abandoned Australia's Jews by indicating he'll recognise Palestinian statehood. Union leaders want a new tax on business to pay for training workers, but employer groups say that's a no-go. It's just one of the big ideas being thrashed out at the government's Economic Reform Roundtable. You can follow our coverage live at theaustralian.com.au. Vladimir Putin is reportedly considering a meeting with Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. That's after positive talks at the White House between the US, Ukraine and European leaders. There's now talk of a Europe-led peacekeeping force and America buying into Ukraine's drone program. Today, are we really a step closer to peace? We all remember this.
God bless you. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
So this sounds like progress.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war.
We'll work with Russia, we're going to work with Ukraine, and we're going to make sure it works. And I think if we can get to peace, it's going to work. I have no doubt about it.
Right? Well, who can tell? As European leaders say they're confident a deal between Russia and Ukraine is close, and Vladimir Putin considers a trilateral meeting with Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, I've called in the big gun, Greg Sheridan, to pick our way through whether this change of tone should make us hopeful. It couldn't be more different, could it, these two occasions?
No, that's right. And that very difference illustrates the difficulty of interpreting Trump because his moods vary so wildly. And I must say, I've always admired the true Trump loyalist because you have to be able to leap backwards and forwards across so many red lines and tie yourself into so many knots. To be a consistent Trump supporter is a high achievement in gymnastics, I think.
This time, Volodymyr Zelensky, having had a bit of a dig from one of the questioners last time around about his clothing.
Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest, why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting the dignity of this office.
I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
He wore a suit this time.
Brian, go ahead, Brian.
Yes, sir. I've got a question for each of you.
Yes.
First of all, Mr. President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good.
I said the one that attacked you last time. See, that was
I remember that.
Yeah, I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed. You are not.
Maybe yours is much better.
Was that a smart move?
Well, it was, of course, but it's completely barking mad that the question of a suit should have come up. Volodymyr Zelensky, in solidarity with Ukrainian soldiers who were fighting and dying in huge numbers, has, throughout his presidency since the war, worn a kind of informal military garb, not giving himself any insignia or wearing phony medals or anything, just to be in solidarity with the soldiers. But when they were picking a fight with Volodymyr Zelensky, the Trump loyalists decided to make a big deal of the fact that Zelensky didn't wear a suit to the White House. And the odious Tucker Carlson said Zelensky is like a nightclub bouncer or something. Why don't you get a nightclub for him to run or something like this? So he wore a suit today. Now, honestly, you're talking about the lives and deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine and Eastern Europe. And the peace agreement may turn on whether Zelensky sacks up to Trump's ego by wearing an unaccustomed suit in the White House. It just shows how bizarre reality has become.
But this is the way you have to play Donald Trump, right? Because things like clothing and symbols mean a lot to him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very strange person, Trump. Now, the difficulty for an analyst is that Trump, at his best, is very good, and at his worst, he's unspeakably terrible. And to hold the two different Trumps in your head at once is very difficult. There are good results that he's achieved internationally. In his first term, he achieved peace agreements between Israel and 4 Arab neighbours. That's astonishing. No previous president had achieved that. On the other hand, there are absolute debacles that he's presided over. Famously, he declared after a meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un that the nuclear threat from North Korea was over and that Kim Jong-un was committed to denuclearising the whole Korean peninsula. No such thing ever happened. Now, the difficulty we've got interpreting what's going on now is that all the messages that came out of the Trump summit with Vladimir Putin are contradicted by all the messages coming out of the Trump summit with Zelensky and with the European leaders. And I think only God knows what is going to happen or which set of messages is going to be true or if something new is going to come up.
So let's talk about what seemed to be the developments out of this Oval Office meeting. There's talk of a European-led reassurance force of troops that could go to Ukraine and keep the peace if a peace deal is reached with Russia. What do you think of that, Greg? Is that something that realistically could happen?
Yes, it could. It could. So there were very confusing reports about whether there was any chance of American troops being involved. Trump seemed to indicate that was a possibility. Then he seemed to indicate that wasn't a possibility. Then he put out a tweet, or whatever we call tweets these days, saying that it would be European forces coordinated by the United States. Now, God alone knows what coordinated means. Now, I suppose this is a concession by Putin because he's always said he wouldn't accept foreign forces in Ukraine. But European defences are so feeble that to deploy 30,000 troops is a huge ask for the Europeans. We rightly see Trump's chaos as a bad thing, and it is a bad thing. But the Europeans, in substance, are more guilty than Trump. Russia invaded Crimea in 2014. That's 11 years ago. In those 11 years, the Europeans have not increased their defence budgets. They have not created military production lines. Now, they've just started to increase their defence budgets now, but they had 11 years clearly where Putin's intentions were telegraphed to them. They are cumulatively vastly bigger economy than Russia. They are there begging Trump to be involved because of their own failure to provide for their own security, which they could well afford to do given the size of their economies.
One of the other things we're now apparently talking about is territory swaps. It seems that Volodymyr Zelensky is open to what he referred to as proportional swaps of territory. There's a suggestion that Russia wants basically most of the Donetsk region, which includes some of Ukraine's most prized territory. What do you think that means, Greg? Are we actually going to see a land swap, and is that maybe the road to peace?
Well, if the Ukrainians do, that represents a massive defeat for them. It may be the best thing to do. Sometimes you're better to take a defeat on the terms that you can get, and if you keep going, you get a much worse defeat. Now, there are two big parts of the Donbass which Russia doesn't currently control, and Putin said that any interim agreement or peace agreement or anything involves him getting at least the rest of the Donbass. Once you cede territory to Russia, it's gone forever. And if Ukraine gets a security guarantee in exchange, well, what exactly does that mean? Because in 1994, Ukraine gave up the nuclear weapons that it had inherited from the Soviet Union. And if it had held those nuclear weapons, it certainly would not have been invaded by Russia. And in exchange for giving those weapons up, it got a historic security guarantee from Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom that it would never be attacked, that its borders were inviolate, that its territorial security was guaranteed. And then a blink of an eye later, Russia invades and takes Crimea, and the West collectively does nothing. Weakness is provocative, and they tempted the Russians to do more. So what you would get if Ukraine gives a great slab of new territory to Russia, you repeat 1994, but you do it with a much, much weaker Ukraine, much harder to defend. The areas that it would have to give up are areas which involve fortified cities, which Ukraine has been able to hold against all Russian invasion attempts up till now. There would be a security guarantee in which apparently there'll be no American troops coordinated by America, but I bet Donald Trump doesn't promise to send American troops to fight if anything happens. Ukraine still won't be allowed into NATO, so it doesn't get the permanent Article 5 protection of NATO. And there'll be the successors to Macron in France and Starmer in Britain, allegedly saying to Vladimir Putin, well, look at the lesson we taught you last time. Last time you thought you'd invade Ukraine and you only got 25% of the country. Do it again and see what happens. You get another 25%. I don't think that can be what was envisaged, because I don't think the Europeans would have emerged from the White House with so much of a smile on their faces. But honestly, we just don't know. And one of the difficulties with Trump is that nothing holds longer than a news cycle.
One thing we do know about Trump is that he's always got an eye on what's in it for America. Last time he met with Zelensky, they were talking about access to Ukraine's rare earths. Now he's asking Zelensky reportedly for a $50 billion stake in the Ukrainian drone industry. And Zelensky is talking about purchasing $100 billion worth of American weapons and equipment through the Europeans. So is that a new development, Greg? Is that something that's emerged now, this conversation about drones and about equipment?
Yes, that is new, and that's quite important. Again, it's very hard to know what strength to give it. Many of these announcements that Trump makes with foreign governments about hundreds of billions of dollars never actually happen. For him, the announcement is everything. Getting the announcement of the deal is everything. It is quite shocking and profoundly morally offensive that Trump is trying to shake down a democratic allied nation which is subject to a brutal invasion by a neighbouring dictator. We would have been appalled if the Clintons had behaved this way. We were appalled when Joe Biden behaved this way with his son Hunter Biden, doing deals with countries his dad was negotiating with as vice president. Ukraine has always bought American weapons. So one way Trump gets round his base not wanting American taxpayer money to go to Ukraine now is to say, well, we'll sell you the weapons and the Europeans will pay for it. Well, that's not bad. That's okay. The Europeans need to pay for Ukraine's defence because defending against Russia is defending themselves. So that's good. But the $50 billion stake in Ukraine's drone, so what does that mean? Ukraine will make drones mainly for its own use and then pay America for the privilege of making its own drones. Just seems to defy not only all morality, but all common sense. But you can take some consolation from the fact that these deals never actually seem to eventuate. You know, Australia has been talking about a rare earths deal with America, I think, longer than World War II went on for. You can't dismiss Trump. He's the most powerful man in the world. Things really happen. But nor can you take everything that he says as actually meaning something.
Coming up, but does Vladimir Putin really want peace? And what will he and the deal-maker-in-chief, Donald Trump, want in return? It's only a few days since we saw Vladimir Putin of Russia and Donald Trump meeting in Alaska in immense pomp and circumstance. Nothing seemed to emerge from that. Do you feel, though, Greg, that there is now momentum here? As you say, the European leaders are in Washington, D.C., looking like they feel like something is happening.
I would honestly say to you, anyone who tells you they know what's going on is, you just want to check what they're having in their morning coffee. But yes, it looks like the European leaders think there's something afoot, so that's very good. But that is exactly the opposite of what Trump and Putin were saying after their meeting last time. The remark we heard Trump make to Emmanuel Macron, he's caught on a hot mic saying, you know what, crazy as it sounds, I think Putin, wants to do a deal for me. So Trump is the platonic ideal of narcissism. solipsism, which means literally the ability to know nothing other than yourself. You only know yourself. Trump is beyond narcissistic. He's solipsistic. And if he really thinks Vladimir Putin is going to do a deal because of his affection for Donald Trump, well, that's barking mad. Putin has done pretty well in charming a whole series of otherwise hard-headed American presidents. Putin has some sort of hypnotic ability to get American presidents to think that he's on the brink of making a deal. But on the other hand, if we look at what Putin's done, he's just continued the aggression, a very Russian pattern, this war. I mean, intelligence doesn't tell you much, but history tells you everything. The Russian pattern of war is they always start very badly. Their logistics are terrible. Their NCOs are always corrupt. Half their equipment has been sold on the black market and so on. It's always chaotic at the start. But then their sheer willingness to endure unspeakable casualty levels and just to go on means that they tend to prevail over time. That's the Russian history of wars. It's quite plausible that Putin is simply saying to himself, look, I can keep these monkeys dancing for months and months, and I am making slow advances on the battlefield. I've turned my economy into a wartime economy. If I tried to demobilise it now, that would be more disruptive to the economy than not. They're never going to stop China and India buying my oil now. I might even have a meeting with Zelensky and present that as a great sign of graciousness and generosity on my part. But I can easily find some way of presenting whatever peace offer I make to Zelensky in a way that I know Zelensky can't accept it, but then Trump so much wants a deal, he'll put the weights on Zelensky, and Putin might just string this out endlessly for months. On the other hand, perhaps Trump is right, and perhaps Putin has had a change of heart, and because of his love of the admirable and spectacular and handsome and best looking ever in history president, he may say, well, look, I've changed. I've had a lifetime formed by the KGB belief in the most obsessive, paranoid and expansive Russian nationalism, but I'm rejecting all of that right now, and I'm becoming an Eleanor Roosevelt Democrat. Who knows? Absolutely anything is possible in this scenario, even a good outcome. But although the Europeans were smiling, and that's a good sign, I wouldn't bet my house on a peace deal coming up in the next few months.
Greg Sheridan is The Australian's foreign editor. You can read his analysis and all our reporting from around the world right now at theaustralian.com.au.